It is 11 o'clock in the morning on Monday, April 15th, 2024. This area for the cows has grass. Let's see, the southern part of this isn't that awesome, but it is much more awesome than the rest of the row's been so far. But the northern half where the trees are, that grass is up past my knees on average. And there's some stands like that. That green stand of grass there is up well past my knees, almost to my belt. You can see Kami, the lamb, is buried by grass. For those of you who are told you have to cut your goatweed back, you don't have to. I didn't cut the goatweed back at all last year. The previous year I cut like the northern 2/3 of my field, and I didn't cut the southern third, and you can see that maybe there's a little more goatweed in the southern half, or the southern part where I didn't cut, but you don't have to mow it down or shred it or whatever you call it. The goatweed also, if you look back at my summer videos, go look at the videos in July, August, and September, and you'll see that some of the best areas of grass had goatweed growing over it. One of the concepts of regenerational agriculture is that the polyculture, the multiple kinds of plants growing in the same spot, will maximize the yield of that spot of ground. So you have like kind of a canopy effect where there's different levels. And the goatweed was acting as the upper level, and then the grass was the middle level, and there's stuff growing at the very bottom. But in concert, what that does is it protects the ground fully from sunlight. Especially in the heat of the summer, you don't want sunlight hitting the ground and warming it up. As long as the ground stays relatively cool, certain kinds of grasses and other plants can keep growing even in the heat of summer. And so that goatweed, I think, provided kind of an insulating air conditioning layer, you might say, so that the grass was able to keep growing very well. And the other concern that people have, what I was told when I first came here, is the goatweed will soak up all the nutrients and all the water in your pasture such that your grass can't grow, and I found that not to be true either. The way water works is a lot of the water leaves your soil through evaporation. And if you doubt that statement, then you can go ahead and call up a local farmer that uses irrigation, and you can ask them when they turn the sprinklers on. Do you turn it on at late morning in the middle of summer, or do you run them at night? And they'll explain to you why they use the irrigation system the way they do. One of the greatest losses of water, and for them, maybe the water resource isn't like limited. Maybe it's just the energy resources, the diesel or whatever it takes to run those generators or those pumps. And so they're trying to conserve reduce their expenses so they can make a little bit of money. And so they'll tell you that it's best to put the water on the field when the sun isn't touching the dirt, right? Because the evaporation is a major loss of water. And so the plants actually, they do use water as part of the process of transpiration, right? They take the water from the ground, they soak it up through the roots, and they expel it through their leaves. Of course, water is also a critical component of the process of life, where sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water are converted into sugars that power all of life on Earth, that if we stopped that process, we would all be dead. But the plants also, quote unquote, put water back in the soil. And they do that through two ways. Number one is when it rains, the roots and the soil structure, the healthy soil, is able to absorb a lot more of that rain and send it downstairs, deeper and downstairs, to protect it from the sun and the heat. But furthermore, the plants, by shielding the soil and keeping it a little bit cooler near the soil, is able to keep that water in the soil for longer at the surface level. So that's why I just let the goatweed grow. I didn't do anything about it. I didn't spray, I didn't shred. The goatweed certainly took over my field. And there was a couple points in the summer where if you looked, you would say, oh, you just go and grow goatweed. But if you walk out into the goatweed and look down, you'll see there's plenty of grass, more grass than my neighbors had. And I attribute that to the fact that the goatweed helped the other plants grow. I think one of the ridiculous concepts we have to eliminate is this concept of monoculture. The idea that we can somehow purify or distill nature down to simple processes that can be described by chemistry. The reality is that it's a much more complex system than we possibly imagined. You know, when Darwin was writing, about the evolution of the species, he imagined cells as like very basic, simple machines like the wedge or the lever, or the wheel, and he thought that those cells put together could create living organisms the same way you put simple machines together to create a complex machine. But the more we studied how cells actually work, we discovered that the average cell has more complexity in it than New York City, right? And so inside of our body is just these, trillions and trillions? I don't know how many cells we have. We have a lot of cells, but each cell is in itself as complex as New York City is. And so it turns out nature is far more complex than we realize. It's far more complex than we can even manage. And so if I were to sit here and try to document every single plant, study each plant in isolation and understand fully how it behaves in all kinds of conditions, and then study each plant in combination and how they deal with each other, and not just like 2 plants together, but 3, 4, 5, 6 plants together. And then I were to document the soil and the nature of the soil and the chemical composition of the soil, the biological matter, and even then I'd have to think about the fungus and the insects and the life cycle of each of the kinds of insects, from the microscopic insects to the ones that we can see and everything in between. And then to put on top of that, we had the complexity of just a single cow, their complex digestion system with the microflora, the microbes that are doing the work of converting those complex chemicals into simple chemicals that their bodies can actually process and use. And of course, that's the macronutrients. What about all the micronutrients and how they play a role in the cow? And then to combine with that, sheep and goats and dogs and everything else in between, birds, chickens, it's just too much complexity. Even understanding one of these things in isolation is almost an impossible task. So, as a farmer, if you decide to do something, hey, Kami, I'm right here. If you decide to, spray a chemical or to, shred your field, you're taking a complex system that you barely understand and making some kind of change to it. And there's no way, I think, that you can fully understand the consequences of your actions, right? And the important thing, I was reading Novum Organum by Francis Bacon, and I've just liked the first page and a half in English, and already my mind is full. But he points out that what we call science, and I think this applies today as well, for the vast majority of people, like there's probably a few people that actually understand these concepts, but what we call science is actually hearsay. It's actually traditions, it's practices, it's things that we've done over and over again. And because they've worked to a degree, we assume that we understand what we're doing, right? And on the opposite extreme, so we have the extreme of people that think they know what they're doing, that don't fully understand the complexity of nature and their limited ability to grasp it. But on the other hand, we have the group of people, and I don't want to be one of these people, and I'm going to explain to you my solution to this problem in terms of farming, and with caveats, of course. But the other extreme is that understanding and making decisions is just rolling dice. Everything's random, nothing's in control, you can't do anything about it, and why bother even thinking about it? It's a waste of time, right? That's more of the nihilist or nihilist approach, right? And in the beginning, Francis Bacon explains that neither of these extremes are useful. Neither of them do what we want to, have any ability to explain nature. And so there's something in between, right? And so Francis Bacon proposes that the first thing you need to do is you need to basically understand that what you think you know is not knowledge, right? And you need to build a systematic approach to understanding and experimenting with nature so that you can actually discover true facts, right? So where does that leave me? Well, right now I'm operating on hearsay. I'm operating on other people's advice that I think are reputable. I've tried to eliminate all the possible biases that they might have, or at least account for them, right? For instance, Greg Judy. Let's take Greg Judy as an instance. So Greg Judy might be doing what he's doing because he's making lots of money telling people to do things that he himself does not do, or that actually don't work. So he's lying about his operation for economic gain, right? That could be a possibility, you know? He sells books. He sells conference tickets to his little seminars, and he goes on speaking tours. And he also sells his cows and his animals. And I'm sure that, you know, his self-proclaimed expertise, I'll just put it that way, is influencing the economic factor. And so he understands that if he were to come out and say, I don't know what I'm doing, you shouldn't pay me any money to tell you what to do because I don't know what I'm doing. And that would, you know, hurt his checkbook. And, you know, I don't know, maybe it could bankrupt his operation, you know. So he has an economic interest, right? And so certainly everybody's biased in that way, right? I'm biased in that way too. I would love it if you guys would buy my animals and pay me, you know, 50% above market price and, you know, all kinds of things like that. Look at this beautiful area, just fantastic. Nice and shady and cool. It's about 70 something degrees, but it's humid. And some of the other biases, we have this bias because we're human, right? Because of the nature of our state. There are certain things we think we know or think we do, and we deceive ourselves. In that regard, we're biased because of our political affiliation, right? Some of us might be on one side of the political spectrum or the other. You know, I've certainly felt, I haven't heard, but I've certainly felt that it might be an issue. Some people see what I'm doing here with rotational grazing and say, oh, you must be one of those liberals, right? You know, and so I might be like, well, I don't want to be labeled a liberal in this town, so maybe I shouldn't do those things. You know, that's like the political aspect of it, or the reputation of it, right? So maybe my neighbors say like, you know, that guy over there, he's retarded because he's doing this, and that, and not doing what everybody else is doing, right? And so there's like this political relationship aspect to it. We did economic, religious, right? Religious biases might play a role. You know, I really want this aspect of my religion to be true, so I'm going to fudge the results to make it look like it's true, right? And things like that, right? Anyway, you have all these biases, right? And everybody has bias. You can't eliminate the bias, but you can account for it, right? And so when I listen to these people talk, you know, Gabe Brown, Greg Judy, Joel Salatin, I can see their bias. I can at least see part of their bias. I might not see it all. Joel Salatin obviously has a political motivation for what he does, right? But he also has experienced, I would say, some degree of political persecution, at least a minor degree, for his political views, and I'm sure the same is for Greg Judy and Gabe Brown as well, right? But eliminate the political bias that they have, and then you eliminate the religious bias that they might have. I think all three of these men are God-fearing men, and they have their own interpretation of what the Bible says and their own vision of what religion is supposed to be. And then you eliminate the economic things, like when you look at the big picture there. Do I really think that Greg Judy published a couple books because he thought he could get rich quick by scamming people about how to grow animals? You know, that's an important, you know, question I have to ask. And the answer is, you know, no. I don't think he did. I think that, you know, he published these books. He's charging a fair price for the books. Obviously, he's getting a little bit of royalties from it, you know, which I think is just compensation for his time. You know, he's very careful with the books he's published. Each book is a little bit different and has different information, and very timely too, I think. Same thing for Joel Salatin. I haven't read his books, but I assume it's the same thing. And I don't know if Gabe Brown has written any books, but he should if he hasn't. But the end result is that I think that they have found something. Now, I really like Gabe Brown's approach because he'll sit down in a 2-hour lecture and he'll tell you and show you pictures. He says, this is when we put this, and that together. This is when we put this, and that together. He's doing actual experiments, and he's documenting what he sees in his most objective way he possibly can, right? Greg Judy isn't as scientific in terms of writing things down, but he's pretty good at sharing his experiences, and I think he has a lot of insight, just stuff that he's experienced for himself and he's seen, you know. And Joel Salatin, same way. I think he's been pretty methodical in his stuff. He keeps pretty good records, and the way he talks about things, like he recommends buying chickens and selling meat chickens as an easy way to get into farming, and he'll go through all the facts and figures, so he really understands these things. But I think that's what you need to do as well on your farm, is you need to learn how to do experiments properly, and you need to learn how to, objectively write down the results. Now, I'm not doing anything other than documenting what I've done and what I intend to do as well, but I often change my mind, and then what the results of that has been, right? And so I'm standing right now in this grass, and I don't know, I can't tell you if I had done something else if this grass would have grown this way, right? I can tell you that you can go back for 1.5 years, and you can watch all the videos, and you can find all the videos where I've been in the forest and listen to what I say about the grass and how it's grown, how I've grazed, what my strategy's been. I've tried to also document what happens to the pasture immediately after grazing. There's several videos I know where I kind of go back in time and show you grass that's like a week old and 2 weeks old and 3 weeks old, stuff like that. So anyway, that's the happy medium, is don't be so full of pride that you think you know what you're doing, and you don't need to do any experiments and don't need to measure your results, right? Don't say, we've always done it this way. Don't say that, of course we know what we're doing. Why would anybody ever question that, right? Instead, say, I don't know if I'm doing it the best way. This is the way I've done it. This is the way I'm doing it. And just be honest with yourself about it, and allow yourself to think of new ideas or allow other people to suggest ideas. Maybe do some experiments, if you have the resources to do so, right? And then the other extreme, don't say, man can know nothing, we're completely ignorant about everything, and there's nothing we can do about it, right? The key that unlocks modern science is both the humility of understanding that you're probably wrong and the pride in believing that you can be right. Both of those things are true, right? And that's what your mindset needs to be, So I'm not throwing up my hands and saying, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not going to try. I'm trying. I'm experimenting. I'm looking. I'm watching, And I already have ideas for next year what I'm going to do differently, And at the same time, I try not to be of the mindset that I know exactly what I'm doing. I said that I don't want to use chemicals, right? Well, I'll tell you what, that injured sheep, I sprayed that sheep full of all kinds of chemicals. And, my buddy, he said he doesn't like to give antibiotics, but he said that the antibiotics might actually help the sheep. And so I'm open to the idea of grabbing some penicillin and injecting my sheep with penicillin to help her recover more quickly from her wounds. I'm watching and monitoring it. I'm not going to describe to you what the exact situation is. I might do a post, summary, because I don't want to give bad advice. But I'm going to try to tell you what happens with that sheep if that sheep dies. I tell you this, I did discover another wound on the back of the neck, behind the head and the back of the neck. That wound does not look as serious as the wound on the side of the neck, but it's a bigger area. And I don't want to disgust anybody, but there are maggots involved. It's pretty disgusting to think about, and I'm kind of a little bit dizzy myself when I think back to what I saw. But I drenched the area with iodine, and I also put some kind of something that's supposed to help the wound heal quicker and protect against the flies, right? I was going to spray, it's called like liquid bandage. It's a product that creates like a seal, right? But I couldn't get the skin, I couldn't cut the fur back on the skin because the scissors weren't any good. I bought some dog trimmer scissors for like $10. Those don't work. It won't cut a single thread of the sheep's wool. But I'm going to probably go back and get some trimmers and figure out a way. I need a way to catch these sheep consistently with minimum stress. So anyway, guys, that's a long video. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.